There are moments in life where time doesn't just slow down, it stops entirely, freezing you in a single second where you have to choose protect the people you love or keep the peace with the people who raised you. I never thought I'd have to make that choice at my own Christmas dinner table. But then my niece picked up a spoon, tapped her glass, and proposed a toast that would tear my entire family apart. Before I get into what happened next, if you're new here, we share real family drama stories on Anonymous Confessions every week. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up for someone you love, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Let me set the scene for you. Hosting Christmas dinner at your own house sounds simple enough, right? Put out some nice plates, cook a turkey, maybe hang a few extra decorations. But anyone who's actually done it knows the truth. It's like running a tiny restaurant where the customers are your relatives, the head chef is also you, the health inspector is your mother-in-law, and every single mistake gets permanently etched into family lore forever. My husband Matt and I had volunteered to host for the first time 3 years ago, right after we adopted our daughter, Nora. That first Christmas mattered to me more than I let on. Not because I love spending my savings on folding chairs that'll get used once a year, but because Nora deserved a home where the holidays didn't feel like an audition. She was 8 when she came to live with us, old enough to read the room, old enough to understand what belonging meant, and old enough to live in constant fear that it could all be taken back without warning. So I went all in. I made traditions. I bought matching pajamas for the 3 of us. I cooked food that required 3 different timers running simultaneously and a silent prayer that nothing would burn. And this year, I let myself believe, quietly, stupidly, that maybe things would finally feel normal. My parents arrived first, right on time. Actually, they arrived early because my mother believes punctuality is a moral virtue, and my father believes standing in the kitchen makes him helpful. The man once tried to help by alphabetizing my spice rack. I still haven't found the cumin, and that was 2 years ago. My sister, Tiffany, swept in next with my niece, Belle. Tiffany was wearing one of those sweaters that looks cozy and rustic, but actually costs more than my first car. Belle followed behind her, hair perfectly curled, outfit magazine ready, smile already warmed up like she was about to perform on stage. Then came the rest. Matt's aunt from out of town, a couple neighbors who didn't have anywhere else to go, and one of Nora's friends' moms who'd stopped by to drop off a pie and somehow got trapped in my kitchen by my compulsive hospitality. That detail matters because this wasn't just family, there were witnesses. Dinner itself went about as smoothly as you'd expect when you're trying to impress people who've known you your whole life. The food was good, the conversation stayed polite, but underneath everything, there was this tension, like everyone was trying to keep their elbows off the table while quietly sharpening knives under it. Nora did this thing she always does when she's nervous. She became extra polite, extra grateful, extra small. She'd ask permission to pass the butter. She'd thank me 3 times for filling her water glass. She'd keep her elbows pinned to her sides like taking up too much space might remind someone she didn't originally belong here. I noticed. I always notice, because when you adopt an older child, you learn something real fast. They don't just listen to what you say, they watch what you tolerate. Then came that natural lull in the meal, plates mostly cleared, drinks refilled, that moment when someone at the table decides we need a toast or a speech or some kind of manufactured sentiment. My mother made some comment about family traditions, smiling like she'd personally invented the concept of gathering together. Belle's eyes lit up. She pushed her chair back, stood up tall, and clinked her glass with a spoon loud enough to make everyone stop chewing. People turned toward her, expecting something sweet, something safe, something like, "I'm thankful for my family," that would let us all sigh and get back to pie. Belle smiled, chin lifted, practically glowing like she'd been practicing this moment in the mirror for weeks. "To me," she announced, raising her glass high, "for being the only grandchild." The room went quiet. Not the deep silence yet, the first kind, the confused pause where everyone's brain catches up to what they just heard. Did she really say that? A couple people chuckled automatically, then stopped, waiting for an adult to swoop in and correct it like a normal adult would. You know, the awkward laugh followed by, "Oh, honey, that's not quite right." But my mom just smiled and nodded like Belle had recited something profound. My dad raised his glass without hesitation. Tiffany leaned back in her chair, beaming, saying absolutely nothing. And that's when the room shifted. Not because of Belle. Kids say ridiculous things all the time. They test boundaries, they poke at power dynamics they don't fully understand. What makes it dangerous is when adults reward it. Nora didn't cry. She didn't gasp or push her chair back dramatically. She just went completely still. Her eyes dropped to her plate like it suddenly held the secrets of the universe. Her hands tightened around her napkin until her knuckles went white. Her shoulders locked up like she was trying to hold herself together using only muscle tension. I noticed. I always notice, because when you adopt an older child, you learn something real fast. They don't just listen to what you say, they watch what you tolerate. Then came that natural lull in the meal. Plates mostly cleared, drinks refilled, that moment when someone at the table decides we need a toast or a speech or some kind of manufactured sentiment. My mother made some comment about family traditions, smiling like she'd personally invented the concept of gathering together. Bettel's eyes lit up. She pushed her chair back, stood up tall, and clinked her glass with a spoon loud enough to make everyone stop chewing. People turned toward her, expecting something sweet, something safe, something like, "I'm thankful for my family," that would let us all sigh and get back to pie. Belle smiled, chin lifted, practically glowing like she'd been practicing this moment in the mirror for weeks. "To me," she announced, raising her glass high, "for being the only grandchild." The room went quiet. Not the deep silence yet, the first kind, the confused pause where everyone's brain catches up to what they just heard. Did she really say that? A couple people chuckled automatically, then stopped, waiting for an adult to swoop in and correct it like a normal adult would. You know, the awkward laugh followed by, "Oh, honey, that's not quite right." But my mom just smiled and nodded like Belle had recited something profound. My dad raised his glass without hesitation. Tiffany leaned back in her chair, beaming, saying absolutely nothing. And that's when the room shifted. Not because of Belle. Kids say ridiculous things all the time. They test boundaries, they poke at power dynamics they don't fully understand. What makes it dangerous is when adults reward it. Nora didn't cry. She didn't gasp or push her chair back dramatically. She just went completely still. Her eyes dropped to her plate like it suddenly held the secrets of the universe. Her hands tightened around her napkin until her knuckles went white. Her shoulders locked up like she was trying to hold herself together using only muscle tension. I noticed. I always notice, because when you adopt an older child, you learn something real fast. They don't just listen to what you say, they watch what you tolerate. Then came that natural lull in the meal. Plates mostly cleared, drinks refilled, that moment when someone at the table decides we need a toast or a speech or some kind of manufactured sentiment. My mother made some comment about family traditions, smiling like she'd personally invented the concept of gathering together. Belle's eyes lit up. She pushed her chair back, stood up tall, and clinked her glass with a spoon loud enough to make everyone stop chewing. People turned toward her, expecting something sweet, something safe, something like, "I'm thankful for my family," that would let us all sigh and get back to pie. Belle smiled, chin lifted, practically glowing like she'd been practicing this moment in the mirror for weeks. "To me," she announced, raising her glass high, "for being the only grandchild." The room went quiet. Not the deep silence yet, the first kind, the confused pause where everyone's brain catches up to what they just heard. Did she really say that? A couple people chuckled automatically, then stopped, waiting for an adult to swoop in and correct it like a normal adult would. You know, the awkward laugh followed by, "Oh, honey, that's not quite right." But my mom just smiled and nodded like Belle had recited something profound. My dad raised his glass without hesitation. Tiffany leaned back in her chair beaming, saying absolutely nothing. And that's when the room shifted. Not because of Belle. Kids say ridiculous things all the time. They test boundaries, they poke at power dynamics they don't fully understand. What makes it dangerous is when adults reward it. Nora didn't cry. She didn't gasp or push her chair back dramatically. She just went completely still. Her eyes dropped to her plate like it suddenly held the secrets of the universe. Her hands tightened around her napkin until her knuckles went white. Her shoulders locked up like she was trying to hold herself together using only muscle tension. I saw it happen. I saw the exact moment my daughter decided to swallow her feelings whole so she wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. Matt saw it too. His jaw tightened. He looked at me, not asking permission, just waiting, because he knows me. He knows the version of me that used to let things slide for the sake of keeping peace. He also knows that version died somewhere around the time I signed those adoption papers and realized I'd spend the rest of my life choosing Nora out loud, on purpose, every single time. I stood up. Not fast, not dramatic, just standing. The way you stand when your brain has already made a decision and your body is simply catching up. I picked up my glass and waited just long enough that everyone had to look at me. The room stopped moving. Even my mother stopped chewing, which was such a rare event it should have been documented for historians. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't make some long emotional speech. I just said, evenly, dry as desert sand, "I'd like to propose a toast too, to clarity. If she's not family, neither are you. Coats are by the door. Anyone who agrees with that toast can leave right now." Then I set my glass down deliberately, like punctuation at the end of a sentence. The silence that followed wasn't awkward silence. It wasn't confused silence. It was the kind of silence where you can literally hear people's thoughts scraping against the inside of their skulls. My mother's smile wavered first. "Sarah," she said, voice going into that fake sweet mode she uses when she's about to gaslight someone. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it was a joke." My dad's face hardened. "You can't throw us out," he said, like I'd just tried to ban him from the entire state. Tiffany's eyes flashed. "Are you serious? You're ruining Christmas over a toast?" Over a toast, like my daughter's dignity was just an appetizer you could order and then send back to the kitchen. I didn't argue. Arguing is what you do when you think there's something to negotiate. I answered once, flat and final. "Not in my house." Then I turned toward the entryway, gestured to the coats, and walked to the front door. I pulled it open. Cold December air rushed in, the kind that makes you suddenly aware of your own breath. "If you agreed with that toast, you're leaving," I said. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish. My dad stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor in a way that made our neighbor flinch. Belle looked genuinely confused, almost offended, like she couldn't understand why the world wasn't applauding her. Tiffany shot up, grabbing her purse like it was armor. They started arguing while they moved, complaining, protesting, doing that thing people do when they can't get their way, making as much noise as possible to punish you for not folding. But they still moved. They still walked toward that door. Because here's the thing about a power shift. It doesn't require their agreement. It requires your follow-through. A couple other guests sat frozen. Matt's aunt looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. One neighbor stared down at his lap, ashamed. Nora still hadn't looked up. Then the split happened. Some people stayed quietly. They didn't say a word. They didn't defend Belle's toast. They didn't defend my parents. They just stayed, like they'd been reminded that this wasn't a debate club. This was my home. My mom, dad, Tiffany, and Belle marched out into the cold. The door shut behind them. The noise vanished. And the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was controlled. You know, if you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. We share new family drama stories every week, and trust me, the comments section on this one is going to be wild. I'd love to hear your take in the comments too. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with your own family? I walked back to Nora immediately. No victory lap, no triumphant speech, just me returning to the person that actually mattered. I crouched beside her chair and gently touched her hand. Matt stepped in on the other side, steady and present like always. Nora blinked hard. Her eyes were shiny, but she still refused to look up, like eye contact might make the tears real. "Hey," I said softly, using the tone I reserve for bruises and nightmares. "You don't have to be small here." She swallowed hard. Matt leaned down and said something quiet, just for her. "You're ours, always." Her shoulders loosened by maybe a millimeter. It wasn't magic. It wasn't instant healing. It was just safety returning in small pieces. I stood up and looked at the table. "Well," I said, forcing my voice back toward normal, dry humor is a survival tool. "Who wants dessert?" Because I did not bake 2 pies just for character development. A couple people laughed nervously. Someone exhaled, someone nodded, and we continued. Not like nothing happened, like something happened and we chose Nora anyway. Later that night, after the guests who stayed finally left, after the dishes were stacked, after Nora was tucked into bed with her favorite blanket pulled up to her chin, my phone started buzzing, then buzzing again and again. But this didn't start at my Christmas table. That was just the first time it got said out loud with a spoon against a glass and adults smiling like they were watching something adorable. If you want to understand why I stood up the way I did, why I didn't negotiate, why I didn't hear them out, you have to go back to when Nora became ours. Nora was 8 when we adopted her. 8 is a brutal age to start over, because you're old enough to understand exactly what's happening, but still young enough to believe every bad thing that happens is your fault. She didn't come to us as a blank slate. She came with quiet, practiced politeness that looked like good manners until you realized it was fear. Fear of taking up space, fear of needing too much, fear of being sent back. Matt and I didn't fall into adoption like it was some cute Instagram story. It was paperwork and meetings and court dates and the kind of waiting that makes you feel like you're asking permission to love a child. I remember the day we finally got the call. We were sitting in the car outside the courthouse, hands locked together so tight it hurt. Nora was in the back seat wearing a dress she'd picked herself because she said it made her feel official. She kept smoothing the fabric down like she could iron out the anxiety with her palms. I looked at Matt and whispered, "No matter what happens, we don't let her think she's temporary." Matt didn't even hesitate. "She's not temporary." That was the promise. Chosen means permanent. My parents had 4 years to adjust to that promise. 4 years isn't a transition period. 4 years is a lifestyle. And yet, they never really adjusted. It wasn't always big, obvious insults. It was the slow drip, the kind you can ignore if you're tired enough. Like the first time my mom introduced Belle to one of her friends and said proudly, "This is my granddaughter.
Then she turned to Nora and said, "And this is Sarah's kid." Not my other granddaughter, not even Nora's name, just Sarah's kid, like she was a package I accidentally brought along. I corrected it politely because I'm a woman and I've been trained since birth to smooth things over like it's my job. "Mom, Nora is your granddaughter too." My mom just laughed and waved it off. My dad shrugged like it wasn't his business, even though it was literally his business to be a grandfather. Another time, at a different holiday gathering, Nora sat beside me on the couch while Belle ran around the living room like she owned it. Someone asked my mom how many grandkids she had. My mom waved a hand toward Belle like she was presenting a prize. "One," she said. Nora was 9 then, 5 months after adoption. I thought maybe they just needed more time. Nora didn't react outwardly. She just went very still. Her eyes dropped to her lap. And later in the car, she asked me, quiet as a whisper, "Did I do something wrong?" That's the moment that haunts me. Not my mother's words, my daughter's instinct to blame herself for someone else's cruelty. I kept showing up anyway because I wanted Nora to have a family. I wanted her to have cousins and holidays and a messy circle of relatives like other kids had. I thought maybe if we kept giving them chances, they'd eventually get it. And I had another reason, one that I didn't like admitting out loud. My parents had started a small online boutique, cute photos, pretty clothes, big talk about building a brand. My mother loved saying brand like she'd invented the concept, not like she was selling blouses through a website that crashed every Tuesday. They loved the fun parts, picking inventory, posting pictures, talking about drops and collections. The part they didn't love was everything that happened after someone actually clicked buy. That part quietly became mine, keeping
Working. Updating listings and sizes, answering customer emails, handling returns and complaints, putting out review fires before they spread. If you've never managed an online shop, let me translate. It's a constant parade of tiny emergencies, and most of them arrive in caps lock. "Where is my order? This size runs small. I want a refund now." And every time, my mom would laugh and say, "It's just 5 minutes, Sarah." 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes the way raising a child is just 18 years, and the way keeping a house clean is just one afternoon if you ignore reality. On top of that, Matt and I sent them money every month because the business wasn't stable yet. There was always a reason, always a rough patch, always a one-time thing that somehow happened every single month. They were always one bad month away from real trouble. And I kept helping because I told myself the same lie over and over. If I keep being the daughter who fixes things, maybe they'll finally act like the grandparents Nora deserves. It never worked. Then, a couple months before Christmas, something happened that should have been their turning point. A buyer, an actual buyer, not just a random lady in a Facebook group, reached out about placing a bulk order. Not 1 or 2 pieces, a real order, the kind that would take their boutique from scraping by to comfortable. It wasn't guaranteed yet, but it was close. I'd already spoken to the buyer, and the tone had been clear. If I was vouching for them, the buyer was interested. The trust wasn't in my parents. The trust was in me. My name was the bridge. I mentioned it casually once, not as a brag, not as a big announcement, just in the middle of one of those family conversations where everyone talks over each other. After the holidays, I might be able to set up something that really helps the boutique. My mom's eyes lit up. Dad leaned forward. Tiffany smiled like she'd already won something. And from that moment on, they started talking like it was already theirs. Not maybe, not if it works out, not we're grateful, just theirs. Which is why when those texts started stacking up after Christmas, I didn't answer. I opened my banking app instead because I was finally seeing the pattern in high definition. They never noticed Nora's face first. They noticed my usefulness, And if they could raise a glass to my child not counting, they didn't get my labor, my money, or my name attached to their next big break. Not me more. I stared at the monthly transfer, that little line item that had become normal, like it was a bill we owed for just existing. I could practically hear my mother's voice. "It's not a big deal, Sarah. It's just a little help." It was never a little help. It was their safety net, and they'd been standing on it while telling me it didn't matter. I canceled it. One tap, gone. Then I did the second thing. I opened my Notes app, the one with all the boutique passwords, the customer templates, the 5-minute fixes that had eaten years of my evenings, and I didn't send it to them. I didn't write a manual. I didn't volunteer a training session. I just stopped. No more fixing, no more responding, no more cleaning up their mess behind the scenes. Then I did the third thing, the one thing I never thought I'd do. Because it wasn't just money. It was my name, my credibility, my reputation. I pulled my name off the buyer deal. I opened the message thread. The buyer's last note was polite, upbeat, full of future tense. Excited to move forward, just need to confirm details. I typed calmly, "Hi, quick update. I'm stepping away and won't be involved going forward, and I can't vouch or act as point person. If you still want to proceed, please work directly with them." I read it twice. Not because I was unsure, because I wanted to make sure it was clean. Not sabotage, not spite, just a boundary. Then I hit send. The room didn't change. No thunderclap, no dramatic music, just me sitting on my couch, heart steady in my chest for a long time. I sent my parents one short text right after. "Hire someone. Don't ask me again." No paragraphs, no "after what you did," no argument to chew on, just a locked door. My phone kept buzzing. I set it face down and went upstairs. Nora's light was still on. She was sitting up in bed, rabbit tucked under her arm, eyes too wide for bedtime. She looked up when I knocked. "Hey," I said softly. She hesitated, then asked the question like it physically hurt to say out loud. Did they mean it? The same question she'd asked in different forms since she was 8. Do I count? Am I real? Am I just being tolerated? I sat on the edge of her bed. "What they did was wrong," I said, "and cruel." Nora swallowed. "But Grandma smiled." "I saw," I said, keeping my voice even, "and I'm not going to pretend that didn't matter." Her fingers tightened around the rabbit's ear. "So I'm not—" "Stop," I said, gently but firm. "You are our daughter, your family, full stop." Matt appeared in the doorway, like he'd been hovering nearby. He didn't push in, he just leaned against the frame and said it quiet and solid. "Always." Nora blinked fast. One tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away immediately, like feelings were something she needed to keep tidy. I hated that. I brushed the tear away with my thumb. "You don't have to be small here," I said. "You don't have to earn your place." She nodded, but it was a shaky nod, like she was trying to believe it. And I knew what she needed more than another speech. She needed proof. So I stood up and said, "Try to sleep. Tomorrow is ours." Downstairs, the phone was still buzzing. This time I looked. "Dad, where's the transfer?" "Mom, answer your phone." "Tiffany, you humiliated us." "Mom, we need to talk." "Dad, call me now." I didn't reply. I let it stack. Because here's the thing about pressure. It only works if you let it into your house. The next text came an hour later, and it wasn't about Nora. It was about money again. "Dad, we're short this month." "Dad, this isn't funny." The buyer email came the next morning. Not to me, to them. I know because Mom forwarded it, like it was evidence in a trial. The subject line might as well have been, "You did this." Buyer, "We're only comfortable proceeding with Sarah as point person. Please let us know if she'll remain involved." My mother's message underneath was just,
What did you do?" I stared at it for a long moment, not because I felt guilty, but because it was so perfectly on brand. They didn't ask about Nora. They didn't ask why I drew the line. They didn't say sorry. They asked what I did, because their world had always been built on what I could do for them. Then my phone rang. Finally, I answered. Speakerphone, because Matt was beside me, and because I wanted everything in the open in my own home. Mom's voice burst out like she'd been holding her breath. "Sarah, are you insane?" Dad's voice came right after, heavy and furious. "You can't do that." I kept my voice calm. "Good morning to you, too." "This is serious," Mom snapped. "That buyer, Sarah, that changes everything. That buyer is not more important than my daughter." A beat of silence. Then Mom tried the first angle, the one she always used when she wanted to erase reality. "It was a joke. Belle was being silly. You know we love Nora." Dad grunted. "You're overreacting." I stared at the wall while I spoke, because if I pictured their faces, I might lose the calm I'd fought for. "You raised your glass. That wasn't a joke to Nora." Mom's voice went sharp. "Don't twist it." "I'm not twisting anything. I'm repeating what happened." Dad tried the second angle, the one that used to work because I was trained to flinch. "We're your parents. We raised you. You owe us." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "You're not owed a relationship with my child." Mom inhaled sharply. "So you're punishing us?" "No, I'm protecting her." Then came the third angle, panic. Dad's voice cracked around the edges of anger. "That buyer is a bulk order, Sarah. That's stability. That's money." Mom's voice turned pleading in an instant, like she'd flipped a switch. "Please just call them back. Tell them you're still involved. Please just fix it. We need this." And there it was. Not an apology, a demand wrapped in desperation. They couldn't believe their ears, because in their minds, I was the automatic support system. I wasn't supposed to withdraw. I wasn't supposed to say no. I wasn't supposed to choose my child over their comfort. "You really did it," Mom whispered, like she was tasting betrayal. "You really canceled it." "I stepped away," I corrected. "I'm not attached to you anymore." Dad's voice rose. "You have no right." "I have every right. It was my name on the line." Mom tried again, softer. "We love Nora." "You love access," I said. "You love my help. You love my money. You love what I can do for you." "That's not fair," she hissed. I let my voice go. "Nora's dignity isn't a price tag. You don't get to erase her and still cash my checks." Silence. Then Dad said bitterly, "You're really going to destroy us." I took a breath. I'm really going to be Nora's mom. That's my job, not saving you. Mom started talking again, fast and frantic, trying to fill the air with words like words could move me. I ended it. I hung up. Not slammed, not dramatic, just hung up. My phone immediately rang again. I muted it. Then I set the phone down and went upstairs to check on Nora, because that was the point, and I wasn't going to let their panic become her new bedtime soundtrack. A week later, relatives started checking in. You know the kind. People who haven't spoken to you in 5 years suddenly become deeply invested in your emotional well-being the moment there's drama to snack on. Aunt Diane called first. "Sweetheart, your mother is beside herself." I didn't let her warm up. They raised a glass to my child not counting. Silence. Then smaller, "Oh." That "oh" traveled faster than any family group chat ever could. Of course, my parents had their own version ready. Tiffany helped. In their story, I was unstable, dramatic, cruel. I had sabotaged the family business. I had destroyed their future. I had pulled the buyer deal out of pure spite. Funny how their story always made me the villain and never asked why a 12-year-old was staring at her plate, trying not to cry. When people asked me what happened, I didn't write essays. I didn't explain for 15 minutes. I used one sentence. They raised a glass to my child not counting. Some people backed off right there. They didn't like the taste of it. Others tried the classics. But they're your parents. It's family. You can't hold grudges. I didn't argue. I just repeated the same sentence. Because if people want you to be the bigger person, it usually means they want you to be the flatter doormat. Then my parents showed up at my door. Not frantic this time, controlled, rehearsed, like they'd practiced in the car. Mom held a gift bag, the kind that's supposed to signal love. Her eyes were shiny. Her voice was soft. "Sarah, we've been thinking. We want to make things right." Matt was behind me in the hallway, not looming, just present, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my own home. Nora was in the house. I didn't have to see her to know she was listening. She always listened when adults came to the door. Old habits die hard. Mom went on, "We love Nora. We do. We never meant to hurt her." Dad nodded like a man agreeing with a statement he'd rather not sign. I didn't step aside. I didn't invite them in. I just waited, because I knew what was coming. I'd lived this cycle my whole life. And sure enough, within minutes, the slip. Mom's voice shifted just slightly, like the mask was getting heavy. "And about the buyer?" she said carefully. "Sarah, you have to understand what you did." Dad's jaw tightened. That was everything. There it was. Not "how is Nora?" Not "we were wrong." The buyer. Mom rushed on, words spilling now that the real topic was out. "Just call them back. Tell them you're still involved. You can still fix this." I let the silence hang for a beat. Then I said quietly, "So this is why you're here." Mom's eyes flashed. "No." "Yes, you didn't come to talk about Nora, you came to talk about your money." Dad's voice went hard. "Don't talk to us like that. You're talking to me like that in my doorway." Mom tried to soften again because she could feel it slipping. "Sarah, honey, we're family." "You toasted that Nora wasn't." Mom's mouth tightened. "You know what we meant." There it was, the real belief sliding out like a knife. I kept my voice calm. "I know exactly what you meant. That's why you're outside." Dad took a step forward like he wanted to bulldoze through the boundary. "We need you." I didn't move. I didn't have to. "No." Mom's voice went sharp, the sweetness fully gone. "So you're going to let us lose everything?" I looked straight at her. "I'm going to let Nora keep her peace." Then I did the simplest thing in the world. I closed the door. Not slammed, closed. Inside, I stood in the entryway for a moment, breathing, letting my heart slow down. From the hallway, Nora's small voice floated out. "Are they gone?" I turned and saw her peeking around the corner, rabbit clutched to her chest like armor. "Yes," I said, and she exhaled. A full-body exhale like her lungs had been holding tension for years. That's the moment people don't understand when they tell you to be the bigger person. That exhale, that's the price of peace, and I'll pay it every single time. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Anonymous Confessions for more real family drama stories. And drop a comment below. I really want to know what you would have done in my situation. Fast forward, my parents' boutique didn't survive. Not because I cast a spell on it, not because I hacked anything, not because I sabotaged them. It didn't survive because it had been balanced on my unpaid labor and my monthly money for so long that the second I stepped away, gravity did what gravity always does. They went bankrupt, and then they lost their house. Not immediately, not in one dramatic movie scene with suitcases on the lawn. It was slower. Notices, calls, panic, silence. then smaller living arrangements and fewer places for my mother to brag about her brand. Tiffany didn't bounce back the way she thought she would. Turns out, when you benefit from someone else's stability, you don't get to keep the perks when that stability disappears. She ended up stuck in a job she would have mocked before, something with a name tag and a schedule she couldn't control, the kind of job where you can't wear a sweater that costs more than someone's car and pretend you're above it all. I didn't celebrate that. I just noticed it, because consequences don't need applause. They arrive on their own. Nora, on the other hand, changed in ways that mattered. She stopped watching the door like someone might come in and take her life apart. She stopped shrinking in rooms. She laughed more, real laughs, not nervous ones. She started taking up space like she was allowed to exist. Our holidays got smaller, better, quieter in the right way. Matt and I started new traditions that didn't involve swallowing insults and calling it family. And every time Nora looks up at me with that softened expression, I know exactly what I chose. So tell me, did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments. And honestly, that's where it all ended, the beginning of everything that actually mattered.